So, you know the bad albums, you know Radiohead, you know Father of All, you know Be Here Now, which is honestly not even that bad. And you're still hungry to know more. Fair enough. This is part 2 of my previous video, The Worst Albums by Great Bands, which will be linked here. If you didn't watch it yet, do, after this one, of course, as not to fuck my retention. But anyway, here's The Worst Albums by Great Bands, Electric Boogaloo. The Beach Boys, Summer in Paradise, 1992. To understand Summer in Paradise, you need to understand what the Beach Boys were supposed to be. Not the band you think they are, the one that sang about surfing and California girls and the simple pleasures of being alive in the sun. That was marketing. What the Beach Boys actually became under Brian Wilson was one of the most innovative pop acts in history. Pet Sounds, 1966, changed music forever in the way it reveled that pop music could be sophisticated, orchestrated, psychologically complex, and still catchy. It was Brian Wilson channeling his inner Gershwin and saying, "We're not a surf band anymore, we're artists." And then Smile happened. Or rather, didn't happen. The legendary lost album that was supposed to be the Beatles-killing masterpiece that instead became the albatross around Brian Wilson's neck for the next 5 decades. Brian Wilson had a nervous breakdown. Not a metaphorical one, a genuine, serious, psychologically devastating mental health crisis that left him unable to function as a human being, let alone as the creative driving force of a band. The Beach Boys kept going without him, though. Somehow, they kept making records. Some of them were fine, such as 2020. Some were amazing, such as Surf's Up. But Brian never fully came back. He surfaced occasionally. Sunflower in 1970 had moments of his genius, but mostly he was gone, replaced by increasingly erratic behavior, hospitalization, and the slow drain of his mental and creative energy. By 1992, Brian Wilson wasn't in control of the Beach Boys anymore. Mike Love was, and Mike Love had a vision. The Beach Boys would make a fun, friendly, commercial album. No pretense of artistry, just pure, uncomplicated pop designed to make people smile, make them reminisce about the good old times, and maybe, if they're lucky, get some radio play. Summer in Paradise was the result. The album is a catastrophe of a different kind. Not because it's aggressively bad like Radiohead, but because it's so aggressively nothing. It's 32 minutes of songs that sound like they were designed by committee to offend no one and excite no one. Kokomo had been a massive hit in 1988. Beach Boys on the charts again, reminding people the band existed. So Summer in Paradise was basically, what if we made 10 more songs exactly like Kokomo? Imagine the worst possible Beach Boys song. Saccharine, lyrically inane, production so bright it causes actual physical pain, melodies designed to lodge in your brain not because they're good, but because they're aggressive in their mediocrity. Now imagine an entire album of that. Summer in Paradise is what happens when a band decides that nostalgia and name recognition are enough to carry a record. The guest appearances don't help. John Stamos shows up. Yes, Uncle Jesse from Full House, and his presence is almost offensive. Everything about Summer in Paradise feels offensive. The production is glossy, the lyrics are aggressively cheerful. Brian Wilson, the man who created Pet Sounds, who nearly achieved his masterpiece with Smile, was not involved at all. The band he built was now being run by people who decided that his vision was nice, but ultimately unmarketable. The tragedy isn't just that Summer in Paradise is bad. The tragedy is that it represents the downfall of the Beach Boys' mind-blowing genius. The band that once stood up to the Beatles and created songs that, and I'm not even exaggerating, can be thought on the same level as works from geniuses such as Bach and Beethoven, by 1992 was nothing but a hollow reflection of its most mediocre achievements, desperately clinging on to its former surf glory. It's probably the saddest album on the list. The Velvet Underground, Squeeze, 1973. Here's the most existential question you can ask about a legendary album. Is it even a Velvet Underground album if no original members played on it? Squeeze is the fifth and final studio album by the Velvet Underground, released in February 1973 by Polydor. By this point, the band had completely disintegrated. Lou Reed, the creative force, the songwriter, the voice, had quit in August 1970 during their final Max Kansas City residency without telling Sterling Morrison or Doug Yule. Sterling Morrison had left music to become a tugboat captain. Maureen Tucker was raising a family, and Doug Yule, the multi-instrumentalist who joined in 1968 and been crucial to both the self-titled third album and especially Loaded 1970, where he played bass and organ and sang lead on multiple tracks, was left standing alone. Manager Steve Sesnick, who'd been a source of constant tension and power struggles within the band, supposedly pitting Reed and Yule against each other, pushed Yule to make one more album on a new Polydor contract. The result? Doug Yule, alone in the studio, wrote and recorded Squeeze almost entirely by himself. It's literally one guy recording an album under a famous band's name, with Sesnick orchestrating the whole thing. To put this in perspective, it's like if a solo session musician released a solo album and slapped a legendary band's name on the cover. It's audacious. It's delusional. It's the kind of decision that can only be made by someone too far inside their own ego to recognize how absurd the whole thing is. And the result? Squeeze failed to chart and quickly fell into obscurity. Critics dismissed it as a Velvet's in name-only album. Fans disowned it. Lou Reed, who hadn't even left behind the master recordings or songs when he quit, instead taking them with him to spite the band, was furious when he eventually heard it. In a 1993 reunion interview, when a reporter asked where Yule was, Reed supposedly replied, "Dead, I hope." Years later, in 2014, Yule spoke to Vice about Lou's dislike, describing encounters where he tried to avoid him at art events. But here's the complicated part. Yule and Reed actually worked out afterward. Yule played bass on Reed's 1974 album Sally Can't Dance and joined his touring band. He was brought back by Reed for Coney Island Baby. But somewhere along the line, things soured. The grudge that Reed held until his death might have been formed later, or it might have always been there, buried under professional necessity. Squeeze isn't actually terrible. Listen to it, and you can hear that Yule was building on where Loaded left off musically. The problem is that nothing sticks. Every song is forgettable. As soon as each track ends, you can't recall what you heard. And that's because Lou Reed's songwriting genius just isn't there. Reed hadn't just left songs behind, he'd left an absence. Doug Yule was talented, sure. He'd played on some of the Velvet Underground's best tracks, including Candy Says and New Age. He'd contributed significantly to Loaded, but he was never the creative force. He was the supporting player trying to solo. After a brief promotional tour for Squeeze, Yule called it quits and allowed the Velvet Underground to die, at least until the 1993 reunion, which notably excluded Yule. Squeeze became the album everyone pretends doesn't exist, the skeleton in the Velvet Underground's closet, the proof that even great artists' legacies can be damaged by the wrong people making decisions when the original vision is gone. It's not a disaster because Yule was incompetent. It's a disaster because Yule was alone. The Velvet Underground was never meant to be one person. It was collaboration, friction, competing visions pushing each other towards something greater. Squeeze proves that when you remove that friction, when you leave one person to their own devices, sometimes you just get silence masquerading as music. Radiohead, Pablo Honey, 1992. Right, so before you rush into the comments, let me make one thing clear from the start. It's not bad. The album exists. It has songs on it. Some of them are pretty good. Okay, are you happy now? But Pablo Honey is the sound of a band that had no idea they were about to become one of the most important artists of their generation. It's a band that sounds like they're trying to be Pixies, which is a reasonable thing to try to be in 1992. The Pixies basically invented the template for alternative rock by that point. But Radiohead on Pablo Honey doesn't sound like Radiohead. They sound like a talented cover band playing Pixie songs while occasionally breaking into their own stuff. Creep was a single, but initially it made little impact. The early singles, Creep, Anyone Can Play Guitar, and Stop Whispering, reached virtually nobody on the charts when first released. The band was sent to aggressively promote in the US, supporting Belly and PJ Harvey, followed by European dates supporting James. Only after Creep was reissued in 1993 did it gradually gain international radio play, reaching number 7 in the UK and becoming the breakthrough moment the band needed.
That's the problem with Pablo Honey. It's really not bad. Like I said, some of the songs are genuinely pretty good. The BBC reviewer noted that Blowout features layers of rough guitar that come together in heavenly unison.
With harmonics that really shine, it's solid evidence that Radiohead was working at a comparatively high level of musicianship at a very early stage. Critics called the band one of rock's brightest hopes, and NME highlighted songs like Anyone Can Play Guitar, I Can't, and Stop Whispering as unabashedly direct tracks, unlike anything that would come later in their career. But here's the thing. Blowout is so wildly experimental compared to the rest of the album that it might as well be from a different band. The rest feels scattered, like a band trying different approaches and not yet confident enough to commit to any single one. Tom York's lyrics are frequently self-doubting and anxious in a way that would become his signature, but on Pablo Honey it just sounds like anxiety without the craft to make it compelling. The album spreads its resources too thin, tries too many approaches, and ends up feeling like a band that hasn't yet discovered what makes them, them. In that sense, Pablo Honey is almost necessary. You can't have OK Computer without Pablo Honey because you can't have a band discovering its revolutionary potential without first trying and failing to be something conventional. Pablo Honey is Radiohead's apprenticeship. It's the album where they learned their instrument well enough that they could eventually shatter it. Blur. Leisure, 1991. I know Pablo Honey is the obvious pick for the debut where band didn't know they were going to be great category, so here's a less obvious one. Same archetype, same time, same country. If Pablo Honey sounded like Radiohead trying to be the Pixies, Leisure sounds like Blur trying to be the Stone Roses with a pinch of Slowdive. It's really good, but I'm sure Damon Albarn had no idea they were ever going to make Parklife or 13. Blur recorded Leisure between May 2020 and March 11, 2091, across 3 different studios with 5 different producers, an inconsistent process that would define the album's scattered, unfocused energy. It was released on August 26, 1991 by Food Records and peaked at number 7 in the UK Albums Chart, eventually achieving gold certification. The album draws influences from the Manchester and shoegaze styles popular in the UK indie scene at the time, contrasting sharply with the Britpop sound that the band would later pioneer, beginning with the follow-up album Modern Life is Rubbish in 1993. The album received mixed reviews upon release. David Kavanagh in Select magazine was enthusiastically positive, claiming the album fulfilled the hype. Paul Davies in Q gave it 4 stars. But A.L.S. Petridis stated that, on the evidence of this album, they don't appear to know what they're doing and as a result make appalling mistakes all over the place, describing the lyrics as bad. The members of Blur themselves have criticized it over the years, citing weaker songwriting and their studio inexperience. The problem with Leisure is that it's undecided. Every track sounds like variations on the same vaguely Manchester-influenced template, but without the conviction or clarity that would make those variations interesting. The lyrics frequently don't resonate. They're clever wordplay and observations that feel clever to the band, but land with a thud on the listener. The production choices seem designed to obscure rather than enhance whatever actual melodies might exist underneath them. But here's what makes Leisure fascinating in retrospect. Damon Albarn himself has disowned it. Early on, in 1995, the band already dismissed Bang as their worst single, which is unfair. It's such a good song. In a 2007 interview, he described the album as awful and as one of the 2 bad records he has made in his career, the other being The Great Escape. That's a little bold coming from the man who went on to make whatever Gorillaz turned into after Plastic Beach. Okay, now you can murder me in the comments.
In 2014, Albarn expanded on the album's recording, explaining that it wasn't a particularly happy experience, and suggesting the band were too keen to please the record label by capitalizing on a sound that was popular at the time. The band rarely played tracks from the album in later tours, with only the singles There's No Other Way and She's So High being frequently included in set lists. Listen to Leisure now, and you can hear Blur's potential bleeding through. Graham Coxon's guitar work shows technical ability, churning atmospherics on Sing, dopey fuzzbox clowning on Repetition, choppy Pete Townsend chords on Come Together. But the album as a whole feels like a rehearsal for a band that hadn't yet become themselves. Songs are good ideas, executed without the polish or precision that would make them great ideas executed perfectly. It's the sound of a band that knows they're capable of something, but hasn't figured out what yet. What makes Leisure a case study in mediocre debuts is that the band would go on to prove definitively that they were capable of so much more. Modern Life is Rubbish in 1993, and especially the self-titled Blur album in 1997, showed what Blur could do when they'd figured out their own voice. Suddenly, the songwriting was sharper, the melodies more infectious, the production serving the songs instead of fighting them. 13 is a masterpiece of atmospheric, moody indie pop. You listen to those albums and then go back to Leisure and you realize this was a band in the process of becoming themselves, and this album is what they sounded like before they figured out how. It's not bad, it's just incomplete. It's a band standing at the threshold of their own potential and not quite ready to walk through. Smashing Pumpkins' Zeitgeist, 2007. Billy Corgan wanted to prove that the Smashing Pumpkins could still matter without James Iha and Darcy Retzky and basically everyone except him. Zeitgeist was going to be the album that showed the world Billy Corgan is the Smashing Pumpkins. It was a contractual obligation disguised as an artistic statement. Island Records wanted a Pumpkins record, and Billy Corgan wanted to prove something to himself and the world. The result was 44 minutes of Billy Corgan proving that he's really good at production and really bad at knowing when he should step back and let someone else make a decision. Zeitgeist is bloated in a way that Be Here Now never achieved. It's not just long, it's insistent. Every song overstays its welcome. Every arrangement is too much. Every drum sound is pounded into your ears until you're begging for something else, anything else. Corgan is a genuinely talented producer, but on Zeitgeist, he's producing in a vacuum, with no one to push back, no one to say, maybe this is enough. So we get 44 minutes of proof that sometimes a band's genius comes from not having total control. The album isn't a disaster in the way that Summer in Paradise is. There's ambition here, even if the ambition is misguided. But it's the sound of someone trying to prove something and ending up proving the opposite. That even great artists need collaborators, need friction, need people who occasionally say no. Zeitgeist is Smashing Pumpkins as a solo project, and the most charitable thing you can say is that it sounds exactly like that. A solo project, not a band. Metallica, Saint Anger, 2003. Okay, we all know. You don't need to know it to know it. The snare drum sounds like someone hitting a trash can in a parking lot during a minor earthquake. It's the most obvious answer to the question, what's the worst album by a legendary band? It's the album that made Lars Ulrich the villain of metal. It's the album that was so bad it spawned a documentary, Some Kind of Monster, explaining how bad it was. The thing about the snare drum is that it wasn't an accident. Producer Bob Rock and Lars actually chose it. In a 2004 meet and greet, Lars explained, "You disconnect the snare, that's the actual snare part of the drum, which creates that clangy, hollow sound." Bob Rock later elaborated that they were inspired by 1973's Raw Power by the Stooges and U2's Octong Baby, which played with the perception of drums. Rock said they were throwing away the rule book and saying, why do we have to set up the drums the same just because what it has to do with metal? So the snare sound was intentional. It was Lars and Bob saying, this is artistic experimentation. Except it wasn't. What it actually was, ego without self-awareness. It was Lars hearing the drum in the rehearsal studio at the band's clubhouse, the place where they'd rehearsed with Cliff Burton years ago, and saying, "That's the sound," without anyone being willing to say, "That's a terrible sound, actually." The thing about Saint Anger is that it's try-hard. It's trying to prove that Metallica could still be heavy, still be relevant,
Still matter in the 2000s. And they were so committed to this mission that they made every single choice that made the album worse. Let's try a new snare sound, one that sounds like nothing else on earth and will make the album completely unlistenable in about 15 years when people are like, what the fuck were they thinking? Let's work with a producer who'll go along with all our bad ideas instead of pushing back. Let's make the song 7 minutes long when they only have 3 minutes of actual content. Let's ignore the fact that we're not really connecting with what we're doing and just keep marching forward. And the snare never stops. It's incessant. Clang, clang, clang throughout the whole damn album. It becomes this constant, drilling presence that prevents you from hearing anything else, no matter how hard you try. Even the decent riffs underneath can't escape it. But it's not just the snare. I'll list the problems. The production is probably the worst in metal history. The songwriting is repetitive. The songs sound lazily made, like a teenager wrote it in his basement. No solos. Guitar tones are shit. Bass isn't loud enough, also played with a pick, which didn't really fit the genre. The cymbals are really annoying, to the point where it's almost unlistenable. Too much double bass, so many fucking riffs. James sounds like a drug addict. The charitable interpretation is that Metallica was trying to do something experimental. The realistic interpretation is that they were trying to prove something to themselves and created a monument to what happens when nobody in the room is willing to say, maybe we should try something else. It's ego, fear, and production mistakes combined into one 79-minute shit show. Tame Impala, Deadbeat, 2025. Kevin Parker spent a decade proving that he was one of the most talented musicians of his generation. Lonerism, 2012, Currents, 2015, The Slow Rush, 2020, the tours, the live shows. By 2025, Kevin Parker had established himself as someone capable of genuine artistry. And then he sold his entire music catalog to Sony Music Entertainment in 2024 and released Deadbeat on October 17, 2025 on Columbia Records. Parker started working on Deadbeat around 2023 and finished recording sessions in Fremantle and at his Wavehouse studio in Indigip, Western Australia. According to promotional materials, the album is deeply inspired by bush doof culture and the Western Australian rave scene. So Parker decided, for my 5th studio album, I'm going to completely abandon the psychedelic pop sound that made me famous and make house music instead. The problem with Deadbeat is that it's confused. It's not confidently experimental like The Slow Rush attempted to be. It's a band, or rather a solo artist working alone, trying to prove something to itself and ending up proving the opposite. What's particularly frustrating about Deadbeat is that Parker clearly knows how to make great music. He's done it multiple times. But he seems to have decided that experimentation is more important than execution, that novelty is more important than craft. The album doesn't feel designed for mass appeal. Many tracks exceed 4 minutes, with End of Summer and Ethereal Connection surpassing 7 minutes. This suggests Parker wasn't aiming for commercial success, which is admirable in principle, but not when it results in music that's sonically boring despite being technically ambitious. It's the sound of an artist so committed to proving he can do something different that he forgot how to do it well. The pattern. What connects these albums is not that they're bad, it's that they're incomplete.
The Beach Boys made an album without the creative vision that made them important. The Velvet Underground made an album with only one member and a manipulative manager orchestrating everything. Radiohead made an album that sounded like someone else's band because they were still learning who they were. Blur made an album before they'd figured out who Blur actually was. Smashing Pumpkins made an album where one person had too much control and nobody was there to push back. Metallica made an album where they tried something new and everyone pretended the snare drum sounded good. And Tame Impala made an album so committed to novelty that it forgot to be music. These albums exist in a weird space. Not quite failures, not quite successes. They're albums by brilliant musicians who, for various reasons, lost sight of something essential. Sometimes it was the loss of a creative collaborator. Sometimes it was success making them scared. Sometimes it was the opposite, the need to prove something making them desperate. Sometimes it was just a band trying to figure out who they actually were and not getting there until the album was already done. And honestly, there's something almost more frustrating about that than a genuine catastrophe. At least with Radiohead,
You can appreciate the audacity of the failure. With these albums, you're just left wondering, did they not know? Did they not care? Did they listen to this and think it was good? Sometimes the worst thing an artist can do isn't swing for the fences and miss. It's hit the ball exactly where they aimed it and realize they were aiming at the wrong target the whole time. Like the video? Subscribe, please. That's how you help me fund the liters of coffee each video demands. If you want to help me even further, consider becoming a member. It's pretty great, actually. This is it. See ya.